so much.
No.
That was truly an honor.
Thank you. Thank you. It was an honor for me. Thank you for the opportunity. I know you had Aaron Floyd.
Yeah.
And so he put this out to the department heads. He's like, hey, if you get a chance to go on the lounge, you got to do it. Really cool environment.
Oh,
so,
cool.
Yeah, really grateful you're doing this.
Thank you. Yeah. Like I said, it's just so many wonderful people that I get a chance to meet. Walking around, I've gotten a chance to just meet different business owners who are just so passionate to be here.
Yeah.
And I love doing like podcast, video production.
It's great. The other thing I'm really interested in doing is, and I don't know if I got this idea from some of your work, but I want to do, it's almost like a kind of like a spotlight of an employee where we just, run, a 5-minute video, some questions on kind of what it's like in the day of a CSO, or what's it like in dispatch, and why are you a dispatcher, and just a way for them to communicate out to the community why they do the work they do. And it gets, helps our community kind of meet the people that are doing the work, rather than, again, being pulled over is not a great time to build a relationship. But maybe if they can see kind of a different employee profile, a different side of our employees, I think would be great. Anytime we can do that, I think really builds that connection. Yeah. Cause we're just people. Like, I enjoy paddleboarding and, riding my motorcycle or whatever. And other people may enjoy that. And so now we have something in common.
Yes.
And a lot of times people just look at the uniform and say, well, you're a cop. I couldn't possibly have anything in common with you. And so a lot of times that, we build barriers between each other, where we actually, enjoy a lot of the same things our community does. And there's a lot of commonalities.
Yeah.
And so absolutely. I think it's, kind of talking about those things brings us a little closer together.
It's so important that you get a chance to show people that human side that absolutely exists. And I think it's easy to spotlight because people like to talk about what they're passionate about.
Yeah. And I've seen lots of great recruiting videos, but I think, our video will show, some cool police stuff, but maybe show off duty, like show them at farmer's market with their family. I mean, so, something like that, just a different side of who we are. Yeah. Because I think that's every bit as important as the SWAT team or riding a motorcycle. I mean, we often show the really sexy things, that people want to see, but it's like, hey, look, this is a great quality of life. Like you have great time off with your family, and you can hang out with your buddies on after shift and go, do things, and, really kind of highlighting that aspect of it is important. And it's funny because you mentioned, your dad, not wanting to talk a whole lot about work, and that's the culture that I grew up in. And so, everything that happened at work stayed at work, and then everything at home stayed at work, and the two should never cross. But what we found out is, that's not the most healthy way to deal with things. And things that happen at home come to work with you, and things that happen at work go home with you, whether you like it or not. It's just, we're not wired to compartmentalize like that, even though we think we can.
Sure.
So kind of the new things that we're doing, at least in our department, is having resources at work where we can talk about what's happening at home, and then we're kind of bridging that gap. And because if you've had a bad day or something's going wrong in your personal life, you're probably not doing very good at work either. And if you're having a rough day at work, you're probably not a great person at home. And so we're trying to really bridge the two and provide resources where we're balanced and happy and more healthy. And so I'm pleased that we're working towards that. We're not there yet, but that's our objective. And we have really good resources that have partnered not only with the city, but with the department for counseling. And we're trying to move towards mandatory counseling. That's a whole nother podcast we could do. But few law enforcement entities have mandatory counseling for all their employees. And so it's once a year, you're going to go sit in the chair and you're going to talk to someone. I don't care if you talk about fishing. I don't care if you don't say anything, but I'm going to provide you an opportunity to go sit down with the professional. And what that does, it takes the stigma out of reaching out and talking to someone. Because if everybody has to do it, then I'm not special because I need help. And so we're trying to destigmatize that process where everybody has the chance to sit in the chair. If you want to have a follow-up conversation, your provider will do that for you. But I feel it's my responsibility to create that opportunity to get you the help, because some people, just won't take the step, and they think they may need it. They've talked to peer support or something, but they haven't made the call to talk to a therapist. And so just trying to get them a little closer to maybe making that decision. Because like I said, if you're happy and you're healthy and you're confident and you're fulfilled, you're going to come to work and do your best work every time. And so, rather than a nice to have, I feel that's my responsibility to make sure we're doing that.
Yeah, that is so unique. I had never heard of that. Has that happened at other agencies before? Where
there are some ones that I think Ventura County, a couple of other counties have been successful at doing the mandatory. As you can imagine, there's lots of lots of rules and regulations around that, not to mention negotiations with our officer association. And we have a great relationship with our police officers association, our union. They're interested, but we just have to put some boundaries in place to what that looks like, so their membership would agree to do it. But yeah, I think we'll be able to pull it off. And the goal is to make sure that everyone has an opportunity. And again, I'm very happy with the number of people that are receiving regular services with, for mental health services and law enforcement. It's a huge issue. So I'm pleased to see that people are doing that. Obviously coming through the tragedy with losing Luca, really brought that to the forefront, and people need help, and we know that. But I think the next step would be mandating that everybody have that opportunity. And again, I can't make you talk, and if you want to sit there and look at your phone for an hour, you're welcome to do it. PD's paying for it. But who knows? I think if you can get an officer in a room with, a mental health professional, they'll probably talk about some stuff, because, we have plenty to talk about. And so, and not only around work, how's it going at home? Like, let's talk about, your wife or your husband or your spouse, your kids. Are your kids doing okay? Like, is there anything you want to talk about with that? And so oftentimes you'll find out, work is fine, but I'm struggling with something at home. Well, what we find out when we dive into that is they're actually struggling at work too, which is kind of creating that cycle. But we can do more, and I think police leaders have to do more for our troops. I mean, you need to.
Whole person care. I love that.
Yeah.
That on the job support as well as home support. I think that's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's, I think that's one of the things that sets us apart from other careers. And, maybe working in, whatever it may be, you go to work and you go home, and maybe they're not too concerned about what's happening at home. And I think for us, we have to be like, and I tell people, I sit down and have this conversation with them, and I'm like, look, I'm going to ask you some personal questions. I'm going to get in your business a little bit. I'm not trying to creep you out. I just need to understand how you're supported or what you may be dealing with outside of work, so we can help you, and allow us to do that to the degree you're comfortable. And that's what I think creates that kind of that family bond. And for some people, work is the safe place, and home may not be going great, but at work, I got my friends, I'm doing the things I love to do. And that's the best aspect of my day. And so, it's good for us to know that, so we can help, again, provide whatever, support we can for people that may need it.
Yeah.
But it's a thing right now. And I think, we've seen some really bad things happen in law enforcement, for a variety of reasons. And so, you look at some of these really high profile incidents, and what I see is violation of policy, clearly. But also what else is going on? What makes a person do the things that they're doing? Are we really looking closely at that? And then culturally, those things have probably been accepted, and this was the one time they got caught. And so what's happening culturally in those organizations where these type of activities are permitted?
Sure.
Yeah. And so I like to think, at least being a small agency like we are, much tighter knit, I feel like I have a pretty good handle on what is going on, and we're building a really positive culture. But for other departments that may be really big, how closely are they watching what's happening? And when something bad happens in Philadelphia, it affects us here in SLO.
It's got to be really, I guess, challenging, but kind of like threading that needle, a delicate approach, because you can't just the wrong approach is abolishing the police, doing these things that are just drastic,
I understand it because somebody once asked me, they said, well, what are your thoughts on, defund the police? And I said, well, I'm not a fan, as you can imagine. It's a brilliant marketing campaign. It really does engage people. And so I appreciate what people are wanting when you say that. My question is, what did we do? How did we get to this point where defunding is the answer? I've never seen things made better with less funding. So if you want better police, it's going to require probably higher salaries. It's probably going to require more intense recruiting, better training. All these things make better police. None of those things save money. So is defund the answer? Probably not. But it's a catchy slogan. But really it highlights the frustration that people have felt. Like, we're so angry about fill in the blank that less police must be better. And so I fully sympathize on that point, and community has a point. So we have clearly fallen short somewhere if that's the answer. But I tell people, good policing costs money. It really does. And it's, if you want the best that are out there that are dedicated to serve, you have to compensate them, you have to train them, and you have to equip them, with good equipment to do their job. And all those things cost a lot of money, unfortunately. But yeah, it's, looking at some of the high profile things, and even here in SLO, we're not perfect. I mean, we've had some things since I've been here that I wish wouldn't have occurred. And when we make a mistake, transparency is your best friend. And I feel like we have good community relationships. We have something called the Police Advisory Committee. And so that group represents, I can't say all of our marginalized community, but it's 50 plus people strong, and each person represents some portion of our marginalized community. And they have a direct line of communication to me anytime. And so when something happens, they can pick up the phone and they can call me directly by being part of PAC. Conversely, when something happens in the community, I call them and I say, look, we had to use force on this person. It doesn't look pretty, and there could be policy violations, and you need to know about this. And we're going to be talking about this in the media. We're going to investigate it, and when it's done, I'm going to tell you what happened. And so I make that very clear when things happen, because things are going to happen, and it's a very difficult job, and we do make mistakes. But having that at least grace by our community to say, okay, don't like what I saw, but they're looking at it, and I'm going to give them some space to do that before we call for defunding or whatever it may be. And the community's been really good at least extending that grace. And
that's so true. We're all human.
That's it.
And I think I wish people could hear that more when someone comes with the idea of defunding the police, for example. And you get to hear what you just said, which is really more of like, where did that come from? Let's reflect on that. And most people are hit with, just an argumentative statement when you're like, oh, where did this come from? I think that is so cool that you do that approach.
Because they, it's easy to have an adversarial engagement. It's like, hey, I want to defund you. Like, what do you think about that? And they expect me to get angry and be like, well, you can't. And I agree with the frustration. It's like, yeah, I mean, you have a right to be mad. Like that's what inspired me to take the job as a police chief, was because I was mad and I didn't agree with what I saw. And I'm like, we need police leadership out there that is leading in a positive way, that wants to take on these big problems and have better outcomes for the people that are doing the work. And I know a lot of people that, just like myself, who've stepped up and are doing that. So for all the angry sentiment and angst, for policing, I felt the same way. I wanted better for our profession, and I'm not going to sit on the sidelines or retire. I mean, I'm going to step up and do something about it. And luckily, we have a lot of people, like I said, especially in California, that I feel are doing that.
Yeah. People proposing certain things have spent so much time coming up with an idea that leads to this, where you, on the other hand, have years and years of experience and time thinking about better approaches too. It won't be solved with just an argument. And so I think a conversation is ultimately what leads to the best practice moving forward.
Yeah, definitely. And we should always be able to talk about it. Yeah. And again, that's why I think there's brilliance when we talk about defunding, because it gets a lot of people's attention and people really can understand that. Yeah. I mean, that's, we could do more with that money. we should be doing more. I agree. But when we talk about, again, whole nother podcast, when we talk about homelessness and we talk about substance abuse or substance addiction, all those things that are happening in our community come with really big price tags. And I don't care what department you put the money in. What I do know is it's going to take more money. It's going to take more resources, especially for our field response teams, to be able to effectively deal with these very complex sociological issues. If you want police involved in any aspect of this, it's going to require more money. It's going to require more funding, more training, more people, and more community resources to make this work. That I do know, and we don't achieve that by withholding funding or pulling back. So we're dealing with some very complex problems in our state, in our city, especially around homelessness. And police have a role. It's not illegal to be homeless. Very clear. It's not illegal to be homeless, but the police still have a role in making sure that even our homeless community are safe and secure. And so, how do we do that effectively? And that, however you distill this down, it comes up to more community services. We have to have a place that people can get the assistance they need. So if it's getting off of fentanyl, or if it's getting basic skills to get a job, or whatever it may be, we have to have those options available. Even shelter for a night, getting someone out of the creek and into a shelter, is that available? And so, we spend a lot of time building those relationships with our homeless community, but in turn, the day they raise their hand and say, today's the day I want help, we have to have a place that will help them. And that is a really big challenge right now in SLO County specifically.
Wow. These issues are complex. Yeah.
Yeah. A little more than you probably wanted to talk about. But
no, I think a lot of this is so important. I mean, honestly, some of these things, I don't know if it's okay we include, because some of these sentences that you talked about mental health, I think would be awesome to include in the conversation.
Yeah. There's a lot going on right now in our community with mental health services, and there's some popular projects and some not so popular projects underway. But what I tell people, and we had a meeting down here at the church a couple weeks ago, I don't know if these projects are the right solution. I'm not an expert. What I do know is we have to do more for the people that need help. And what, if you want more enforcement, great. I have to have more resources too. I can't just put people in jail or write tickets. That's not humane and that's not ethical. There has to be other services out there. We can direct them to get assistance. No one should live in the creek. No one should live on the road, on the sidewalk. So how can we find other resources to better support them so they're not directed into the criminal justice system, and that they're diverted to healthcare or mental health services or substance treatment, things like that.
Wow.
And so it's a very complex, problem. I'm glad that our community leads in a lot of ways. They're looking for more resources. We're investing in our homeless response. But for the perceivable future, PD, the police department, is going to be part of that response. And we can still do it in a humane, ethical way. But to think that we're going to do it with less funding or less training is not possible.
It's a large responsibility you've taken on, and again, like hearing you talk, it's amazing. Just hearing your approach and hearing your passion to approaching it.
Thank you for saying that. And again, I can't take credit because I'm merely the mouthpiece for our organization, and a lot of the things that I talk about here today have come from my staff, and they're telling me this is the way that they want or would like to police, or this is how we should solve street level problems. And so, when I talk about least harm approaches, that it's great you and I can have that conversation, but my coworkers, my teammates are the ones that are doing it, and they're doing it in some really exciting and innovative and groundbreaking ways that I can't even imagine. And so the credit belongs with the people out there doing the work, honestly. But I'm happy that our team, that's what they want. They want better outcomes for people. And that's really, really exciting for, any police, administrator to hear, hey, we want people to have a positive experience with us. We want them to improve their circumstances. We want them to be, proud, contributing members of our community. That's what your officers and dispatchers and first responders want. And that's exciting.